Rain hammered the cracked asphalt of Highway 89 like the fists of God himself, angry and relentless. The kind of rain that doesn't fall in the Arizona desert often, but when it does, it comes with a reckoning. Lightning split the sky in jagged white scars illuminating the lonely stretch of road where civilization had almost given up. Almost, but not quite. There, defiant against the storm, stood a single building. Sunset Diner. Its neon sign flickered red, then gold, then red again, casting shadows that danced across the wet pavement like ghosts of travelers long gone. The building itself looked weathered, beaten down by 4 decades of desert sun and the occasional storm like this one. But it stood. It endured, just like the woman inside. Margaret Sullivan stood behind the counter, her hands moving with the precision of 42 years of muscle memory. Pour the coffee, check the pie in the oven, wipe down the counter, glance at the highway. Wait, always waiting. 78 years old, but her hands didn't shake as she poured coffee into a chipped mug. Not yet, not until she saw them. The hands were weathered, marked by decades of work, small burns from hot pans, the calluses of a life spent in service. But they were steady, strong. Her eyes, though, those told a different story. They held the kind of sadness that comes from waiting. 40 years of waiting for a son who vanished, for answers that never came, for a miracle she refused to stop believing in even when the whole world told her to let go. The diner was empty tonight. It usually was these days. Highway 89 wasn't the main route anymore. The interstate had siphoned off most of the traffic 20 years ago. Now it was just truckers taking shortcuts, bikers looking for the scenic route, and the occasional family trying to find America the old-fashioned way. Maggie walked to the window, looked out at the rain. The highway stretched in both directions, disappearing into darkness. She'd stood at this window 10,000 times, 100,000 times, every night for 42 years, watching cars pass, hoping one would stop, hoping one would bring him home. She closed her eyes and, for just a moment, she let herself remember. The memory came in color, vivid and sharp, despite the decades. Summer 1982, the diner's grand opening, David in his police uniform grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. He'd built this place with his own hands, every nail, every board. Their dream. A place to call home. And Ezra, 16 years old, all gangly limbs and bright eyes, wearing his first leather jacket. David had bought it for him. Too big room to grow into. Ezra had beams spun around to show it off. "I look like a real biker, Dad." David had laughed, pulled him into a headlock. "You look like trouble, son, just like your old man." The three of them standing in front of the diner, the sign glowing new and bright above them. A family, complete, happy. The memory dissolved like sugar in water, and Maggie was back in the present, black and white, silent except for the rain and the hum of fluorescent lights. The diner felt like a tomb. She walked to the far wall where photographs hung in mismatched frames. Her life in pictures, David and Maggie on their wedding day, 1964, David in his police uniform receiving a commendation, the diner under construction, Ezra as a baby, Ezra at 5, Ezra at 10, Ezra at 16 with that leather jacket, and then nothing. The photographs stopped at 18. Graduation day, June 1984. Ezra in his cap and gown standing between his parents, his whole life ahead of him. Army recruiter pamphlets in his back pocket. Plans to enlist after summer. Dreams of serving his country, then coming back to help run the diner. 3 weeks after that photo was taken, he was gone. Maggie touched the frame gently, her fingers tracing the outline of her son's face. "Where are you, baby?" she whispered. "Wherever you are, find your way home." She'd said those words every night for 40 years, a prayer, a plea, a promise that she would never stop looking, never stop believing. The coffee pot beeped. She turned away from the photographs, returned to the counter, to the routine that kept her sane. Pour, wipe, wait. The bell above the door would chime soon. Someone would come in from the storm. They always did eventually. She'd serve them coffee and pie, make small talk, and they'd leave. The highway would swallow them whole, and she'd never see them again. That was life now, a series of strangers passing through, none of them the one she was waiting for. Maggie pulled the apple pie from the oven, perfect golden crust, cinnamon steam rising. Ezra's favorite, and she'd made it exactly the same way for 40 years. Extra cinnamon, just the way he liked it. Maybe it was foolish baking a dead boy's favorite pie every single day, but a mother knows things. Deep in her bones, in the marrow, in the place where life is created and carried and brought into the world. A mother knows when her child is still breathing. Somewhere. Somehow. The thunder rolled across the desert like a war drum, and Maggie felt it in her chest. Something was coming, something was changing. The air felt charged electric the way it does right before lightning strikes. She looked out the window again, and that's when she heard it. Not thunder. Something else. A rumble. Deep. Mechanical. Growing louder. Motorcycles. Maggie's breath caught in her throat. Her hand trembled, and the coffee mug she'd been holding slipped from her fingers, crashed against the floor. Brown liquid spread across the linoleum like spilled blood. Because she knew what motorcycles meant in the desert at night. David had told her stories before he died. Stories about motorcycle clubs. About violence hidden behind brotherhood. About men who answered to no law but their own. And now they were coming here. 8 of them. The headlights cut through the rain, first 8 pairs of eyes emerging from the darkness. Then the bikes themselves rolling into the gravel parking lot like mechanical beasts. Harley Davidsons. The real ones. Heritage classics with engines that sounded like war drums, like thunder contained in metal and chrome. They parked in a line perfectly synchronized and killed their engines. The sudden silence was deafening. Just the rain hammering the roof, the wind howling, and Maggie's heart pounding in her ears. 8 men dismounted. Big men, all of them. Leather jackets dark with rain patches, visible even from inside. She couldn't make out the details, but she didn't need to. She knew what those patches meant. They were Hell's Angels. The first man through the door was the kind that filled a room without trying. 6'2", maybe 220 pounds of muscle and leather. He moved with the precision of a soldier, each step deliberate, measured. His jacket bore the unmistakable patch Hell's Angels Phoenix chapter. But it was the rocker on top that made Maggie's blood run cold. President. This was their leader. Silas McKenzie. 58 years old, face like carved granite, weathered by sun and sand, and things he'd never speak about. Gray beard close cropped, eyes the color of storm clouds, the kind that held lightning inside them waiting to strike. He stopped 3 feet from the counter. Far enough not to threaten. Close enough to be heard over the rain hammering the roof. Ma'am, his voice was gravel and whiskey. Place open. Maggie wanted to say no, wanted to point to the door and tell them to leave. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way he stood, weight on his back foot, hands visible, non-threatening. Maybe it was the exhaustion in his eyes, the kind that comes from riding through a storm because stopping wasn't an option. Or maybe it was something else, something she couldn't quite name. A pull, a recognition that made no sense. Counter or booth, she heard herself say. Silas glanced at his men. A silent communication passed between them, the kind born from years of riding together, living together, fighting together. Booths, if that's all right, he paused. We'll be quiet. Just need coffee and whatever you got that's hot. One of the men stepped forward, massive with a gray beard down to his chest and eyes like broken glass. Irish accent buried under decades of American roads. And pie, if you got it. Old Declan here has been talking about pie for the last 100 miles. Declan. Maggie filed the name away. This one was older than the rest, maybe 62, 63. But sharp, this one missed nothing. Apple pie, Maggie said, surprising herself. Made it fresh this morning. Silas nodded, gestured to his men. They moved to the booths at the back, all except Silas and Declan, who took the booth nearest the door. Maggie noticed that too. Silas sat with his back to the wall, eyes on the entrance, the windows, the emergency exit near the kitchen. Soldier habits, or something else. She brought coffee first. 8 mugs on a tray, her hands barely holding steady. When she placed the first cup in front of Silas, he looked up. Their eyes met. And something happened that Maggie couldn't explain, wouldn't even try to explain if someone asked. A flicker of recognition, like seeing a face in a crowd you swear you know but can't quite place. It passed so quickly she thought she'd imagined I heard it. Thank you, ma'am. Silas wrapped his hands around the mug. Big hands, scarred knuckles. A faded tattoo on his right wrist barely visible beneath the leather jacket cuff. Maggie's throat went dry. You boys been riding long, she managed. Phoenix to Flagstaff. Had to take it slow in this weather. He took a sip, closed his eyes briefly. Good coffee. Been making it 42 years. You learn a thing or two. Silas opened his eyes again, and this time he really looked at her. Not just seeing her, looking. The way a man looks when he's trying to solve a puzzle that doesn't have all its pieces. 42 years, that's a long time to be anywhere. It's home, Maggie said simply, or as close as I got to one anymore. Something shifted in Silas's expression. Just for a second. Like she'd said something that struck a chord he didn't know he had. Before he could respond, Declan cleared his throat. The pie, love. Don't suppose we could trouble you for that. Maggie nodded, turned toward the kitchen. But as she walked away, she felt Silas's eyes on her back, felt them like a weight, like a question being asked without words. In the kitchen, she braced herself against the counter, her heart hammered in her chest. Ridiculous. She was 78 years old. Too old for her body to betray her like this. Too old for her hands to shake because of a stranger's eyes. Except they weren't shaking because she was afraid. They were shaking because of the way he'd ordered his coffee. Black, no sugar. The way David used to drink it. The way Ezra had started drinking it at 16, trying to be like his father. And the way he'd sat down. And the way he'd tilted his head when he listened. Small things. Meaningless things. Things that reminded her of Ezra. She cut 8 slices of apple pie, extra cinnamon, just like Ezra used to like it. She didn't even realize she was doing it until the plates were ready. When she brought them out, Silas was staring at his coffee like it held answers to questions he'd never asked. She placed the plate in front of him. Apple pie, extra cinnamon. Silas looked up sharply. How'd you know? Know what? That I like extra cinnamon. The words hung between them. Maggie's pulse thundered in her ears. Lucky guess, she managed, but it wasn't, and somehow they both knew it. Silas picked up his fork, cut a piece, brought it to his mouth, chewed slowly, and then he stopped, completely still. The fork still in his hand, suspended in midair. He was somewhere else, transported. A kitchen, warm, sunlight through yellow curtains, the smell of cinnamon and apples, a woman humming, hands as hands but smaller, younger, reaching for a slice of pie still warm from the oven, a voice soft and loving. Careful, baby, it's hot, but I made it with extra cinnamon, just how you like it. The memory, if that's what it was, lasted only a second, but it hit him like a freight train. You all right? Declan asked, concerned. Silas blinked, set the fork down. Yeah, I'm good. Just reminded me of something. Of what? Don't know, can't remember. He said it like it was true, like there were things in his head that existed as shadows, shapes without substance. Memories that weren't quite memories. Maggie knew that feeling. She'd lived with ghosts for 40 years. She moved to the other table, served the rest of the men, made small talk. But her mind was racing, her heart pounding. She kept glancing at Silas, cataloging details. The way he held his fork. Left-handed? Ezra had been left-handed. The small scar behind his left ear, barely visible. Ezra had a scar there too. Fell off his bike when he was 7, needed 3 stitches. The set of his shoulders, the shape of his hands, the way he looked at the world like he was constantly calculating threats, exits, variables. David had looked at the world that way too, police officer habits, and he'd been teaching Ezra, training him for the military. Stop it, Maggie told herself. Stop seeing ghosts. This man is not your son. Your son disappeared 40 years ago. Your son is gone. But a mother knows. The rain hadn't let up. If anything, it had gotten worse. The windows rattled in their frames. The wind howled like something alive and angry. Silas and his men had finished their pie, finished their coffee, but they hadn't left. Something kept them there. Maybe the storm, maybe something else. Maggie refilled cups without being asked, moved between tables like she'd done 10,000 times before. Routine, muscle memory, the kind of work that lets your mind wander while your body knew what to do. She was pouring Silas's 4th cup when the bell above the door chimed again. This time everyone went still. 5 men walked in, but they weren't like Silas and his crew. These men wore suits, expensive ones, tailored the kind that cost more than most people made in a month. They moved like sharks, smooth, predatory, absolutely certain of their place at the top of the food chain. The man in front was maybe 54, tall silver hair, slicked back a smile that never reached his eyes. He looked around the diner like he was evaluating property calculating worth. Vincent Carver. Maggie's blood turned to ice. She knew this man. Not personally, but she'd seen his commercials, his billboards. Carver Mining Corporation. One of the biggest operations in Arizona. Copper, silver, rare earth metals. Billions of dollars. Power. Influence. The kind of man who got what he wanted because no one was stupid enough to tell him no. Mrs. Sullivan. Carver's voice was smooth practiced. The voice of a man used to getting his way without ever raising it. Beautiful evening, isn't it? It's pouring rain, Mr. Carver. A matter of perspective. He smiled, gestured to one of his men who pulled out a folder. I won't take much of your time. I know you're busy. He glanced at Silas and the Hells Angels. His smile widened. Not friendly, amused. Interesting clientele you've got tonight. Silas didn't move, didn't respond. Just watched. The way a wolf watches. Patient. Waiting. Carver turned his attention back to Maggie. I'll get straight to the point. My company has been conducting surveys in this area. Turns out the land you're sitting on has significant mineral deposits. Copper, possibly more. He slid the folder across the counter. I'm prepared to offer you $4.2 million. Cash. You can retire. Move somewhere nice. Somewhere that doesn't require you to work 70-hour weeks at 78 years old. Maggie didn't touch the folder. Not interested. Mrs. Sullivan. I said no. Carver's smile thinned. You haven't even looked at the offer. Don't need to. This diner belonged to my husband. He built it with his own hands. We raised our son here. This is all I have left of them. It's not for sale. Not for $4 million. Not for $40 million. Something flickered across Carver's face. Annoyance, maybe anger, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by that practiced smile. I understand. Sentimental value, I respect that. He pulled a business card from his pocket, set it on the counter. But things change. People change their minds. When you do call me, the offer stands for 48 hours. He turned to leave, stopped, looked back at Maggie. 48 hours, Mrs. Sullivan. After that, well, opportunities like this don't come twice. It wasn't a threat, not exactly, but the weight behind the words was unmistakable. Carver and his men left. The door closed behind them. The rain swallowed the sound of their Mercedes pulling away. Maggie stood frozen. The business card seemed to burn on the counter. Ma'am, she looked up. Silas had risen from his booth, stood a respectful distance away. But his eyes had changed. The exhaustion was gone. Now they held something else. Focus. Purpose. The eyes of a man who recognized danger when he saw it. You know that man, Silas asked. Only by reputation. What kind of reputation? The kind that gets what it wants, one way or another. Silas was quiet for a moment. Then, how long you been running this place alone? 15 years, since my husband passed. Family nearby. Maggie's throat tightened. No, no family. It was the truth, and it wasn't. Because somewhere out there she believed with every fiber of her being Ezra was alive. But she couldn't say that. Couldn't explain it to a stranger. Couldn't put into words the certainty that lived in her bones. Silas seemed to read something in her silence. He glanced at Declan, at the other men, another one of those wordless communications. We'll stick around tonight, Silas said, just to make sure everything's quiet. You don't have to do that. No, ma'am, we don't, but we're going to anyway. Maggie opened her mouth to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't pity. It wasn't even kindness exactly. It was something simpler, more fundamental. This was a man who didn't walk away when someone needed help, even if they were a stranger, even if it wasn't his fight. I don't have money to pay you, she said quietly. Didn't ask for money. Just point me to where we can park the bikes under cover, and maybe another pot of coffee. Maggie felt something crack inside her chest. Not breaking, opening, like a door that had been locked for 40 years. There's a garage out back, she said. Hasn't been used in a while, but it's drum. That'll do. Silas turned to his men. Knox Garrett, take first watch. 2-hour shifts. Stay sharp. They nodded, rose from their boots, moved like soldiers, because that's what some of them were or had been. War leaves marks visible and invisible. Silas carried both. Maggie led them to the back door, showed them the path to the garage. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle, the kind that whispers instead of screams. She unlocked the garage door, pushed it open. Inside, covered with a tarp, sat a shape that made her heart ache. Silas noticed it too. "What's under there?" "My son's motorcycle. A Harley Sportster, 1974 model. My husband bought it for him, spent 6 months restoring it." Her voice caught. "I couldn't bring myself to sell it." Silas stared at the covered bike for a long moment. His hand twitched like he wanted to reach out and touch it, but he didn't. "Your son," he said carefully. "What happened to him?" Maggie had answered that question 1,000 times over 40 years. Always the same prepared response. "He died a long time ago." But standing here in the garage, rain dripping from the eaves, this stranger beside her, the prepared response wouldn't come. Instead, the truth did. He disappeared 40 years ago, when he was 18. She looked at Silas, at this man with storm cloud eyes and a soldier's bearing. "They told me he was dead, told me there was a fire and he didn't make it out. But they never found his body, never found any proof. They just declared him dead and closed the case. And you didn't believe them." "No, I never did. A mother knows." She pressed her hand to her chest. "I've known for 40 years that my son is alive somewhere. I just don't know where." The silence that followed was heavy with things unsaid. Silas's jaw tightened, his hands clenched at his sides. Declan, standing in the doorway, had gone completely still. "This son of yours," Silas said finally, "Ezra, what was he like?" The question caught her off guard. Most people didn't ask. Most people offered condolences and changed the subject. Smart, curious, loved motorcycles, used to take apart engines just to see how they worked. He could fix anything, build anything. She smiled through tears that threatened to fall. He was going to join the army, had it all planned out, and then he was just gone. Silas stood very still, too still, the kind of still that comes before an explosion or a breakdown. "Ma'am, I need to." He stopped, shook his head. "I need some air." He turned and walked out into the rain before Maggie could respond. Declan stepped forward, his Irish accent thick with concern. "Mrs. Sullivan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer truthfully. When did your son disappear?" "What year?" 1984, June 21st. "And where?" "Phoenix. There was a fire at a psychiatric hospital. They said he was there, said he died in the fire, but they never found a body," Declan finished. His face had gone pale. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. What is it?" Declan looked out at the rain where Silas had disappeared. "Mrs. Sullivan, how old would your son be now if he'd lived?" 58. He'd be 58 years old. Declan closed his eyes. "Same age as our president." "I don't understand." "Silas Mackenzie, the man who just walked out into that rain. He's 58 years old, and he doesn't remember anything before he was 18. Says he was in a fire in Phoenix. Says they told him his parents died and he was the only survivor. They gave him a name, Silas Mackenzie, put him in foster care, and that was that." Maggie's world tilted. When was this?" 1984. The garage spun. Maggie reached out, grabbed the workbench to steady herself. "No, that's impossible." "Is it?" Declan's eyes were sharp, cutting through her denial. "Your son disappears in a fire in Phoenix in 1984. Silas appears in a fire in Phoenix in 1984. Same year, same city, same age. No memory of before. Lots of people were in that fire. With no memory, with a completely new identity, with foster records that don't quite add up." Declan shook his head. "I've known Silas Mackenzie for 15 years, Mrs. Sullivan. Rode with him, fought beside him, and in all that time, I've never seen him react to anything the way he just reacted to you, to this place, to that pie. The pie. Extra cinnamon. You didn't ask how he liked it. You just knew." "How did you know?" Maggie's hands were shaking now. "It's how my son liked it. It's how I've made it for 40 years. And Silas knew too. The second he tasted it, he knew. I saw his face. He remembered something. Something he shouldn't remember if he's just Silas Mackenzie with no past. This is insane. You're saying that man out there, that Hell's Angels president, is my son? I'm saying it's possible. More than possible. Declan stepped closer. Mrs. Sullivan, did your son have any distinguishing marks? Scars, birthmarks, anything? Maggie's mind raced. A scar behind his left ear from when he fell off his bike when he was 7. Needed 3 stitches. And a birthmark on his right shoulder blade shaped like a crescent moon. Declan nodded slowly. You need to ask him. You need to see. I can't just... Yes, you can. Because if I'm right, if that man is your son, then someone went to a hell of a lot of trouble to make him disappear, to erase who he was. And if that's true, then you both deserve to know the truth. Outside, the rain had stopped. Silas stood in the gravel parking lot, his face turned up to the sky, letting the last few drops hit his skin. He was drowning, not in water, in something worse, in the feeling that his entire life was built on quicksand and the ground was shifting beneath his feet. The pie had tasted like home, not like good pie, like home, like a specific moment in time, a specific kitchen, a specific woman's hands, and the diner. The second he'd walked in, something in him had recognized it, not consciously, deeper than that, bone deep, soul deep. And this woman, this Margaret Sullivan, when she looked at him, it wasn't the way strangers looked at each other. It was the way someone looks at a ghost they'd been mourning for 40 years. He pulled up his sleeve, stared at the tattoo on his right forearm. Coordinates. He'd gotten them 10 years ago after a particularly vivid nightmare. He'd woken up with the numbers seared into his brain, couldn't shake them. So he'd made them permanent. 33.448, 4 degrees north, 112.0740 degrees west. He'd never looked them up, never questioned why he had them, just accepted them as another piece of the puzzle that was his broken memory. Now, standing in the rain, he pulled out his phone, opened Google Maps, typed in the coordinates. The pin dropped, right on top of Sunset Diner. No, he breathed. No, no, no. But even as he said it, something inside him was waking up. Something that had been buried for 40 years. Something that remembered. The coffee, the way it tasted. Not because it was good, but because it tasted like every morning of a childhood he couldn't remember. The pea, extra cinnamon. How had she known the small scar behind his left ear? He'd always had it, never knew where it came from. And the woman's face in his dreams, blurry, indistinct. But when he'd looked at Margaret Sullivan tonight for just a second, the face in his dreams had come into focus. Silas sank to his knees in the gravel. Rain pounded his back. And for the first time in 40 years, he let himself ask the question he'd been running from his entire life. Who am I? The answer terrified him. Because if Margaret Sullivan was right, if he really was Ezra Sullivan, then everything he thought he knew about himself was a lie. His name, his past, his entire identity, all of it, gone, stolen, erased. And he didn't know if he had the strength to face that truth. Inside the diner, Maggie stood at the window watching Silas kneeling in the rain. Every instinct screamed at her to run to him, to hold him, to tell him it was going to be okay. But she didn't move, because she understood something fundamental about her son if he was her son. He was a man who needed to come to the truth on his own terms. She couldn't force it, couldn't rush it. All she could do was wait, the way she'd been waiting for 40 years. Silas stood slowly, his knees protesting. Everything protested, but he made himself move, made himself walk back to the diner. When he pushed through the door, Maggie and Declan were waiting. I need to know something, Silas said. His voice was raw, stripped bare. Your son, did he have any distinguishing marks? Scars, birthmarks. Maggie nodded, tears streaming down her face. A small scar behind his left ear, from when he fell off his bike when he was 7, and a birthmark on his right shoulder blade, shaped like a crescent moon. Silas closed his eyes, reached up, touched the scar behind his left ear with trembling fingers. Then he turned around and pulled off his wet shirt. On his right shoulder blade, clear as day, was a birthmark shaped exactly like a crescent moon. Maggie's knees gave out. Declan caught her, helped her into a chair. Ezra, she whispered. Silas turned back around. His face was a mask of pain and confusion and fear. My name is Silas Mackenzie. Your name is Ezra Sullivan. I don't, I don't remember being him. I know. Maggie walked toward him slowly like approaching a wounded animal. I know. But you're here now, after 40 years. You found your way home. This isn't my home. But even as he said it, his eyes betrayed him, because something in him recognized this place, this woman, this truth he'd been running from his entire life. Maggie reached out, placed her hand on his cheek. He flinched, but didn't pull away. You are my son, she said, and I have waited 40 years to say that. I don't care what name you use. I don't care what you remember or don't remember. You are mine, and I am never letting you go again. Silas's breath hitched, and for just a second Maggie saw it. The boy he used to be. Scared, alone, lost. But then headlights flooded through the window. A car, black Mercedes, the same one from earlier. Carver's car. It parked right in front of the diner. The door opened. But it wasn't Carver who stepped out. It was three men, big, armed, moving with military precision. Declan swore. Press, we got company. Silas's entire demeanor changed. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by something cold, hard, dangerous. He pulled his shirt back on, walked to the window. Get her to the back, he said. Silas. Now Declan. The old Irishman didn't argue. He grabbed Maggie, pulled her toward the kitchen. Silas walked to the door, stepped outside, faced the three armed men alone. Help you, gentlemen. The lead man smiled. Mr. Carver sends his regards, says the old lady's time is up, and you boys need to move along. This doesn't concern you. Pretty sure it does now. That right? Yeah. See, I don't like it when people threaten old women. Call it a character flaw. The man's smile faded. You really want to do this, biker? There's three of us. One of you. Silas smiled then. And it was the most terrifying thing Maggie had ever seen, even from the kitchen, watching through the pass-through window. She felt the cold radiating off him. You're right, Silas said. It's not fair. He cracked his knuckles. For you. The first man reached for his gun. He never made it. Silas moved like lightning, like violence personified. 3 seconds. That's all it took. 3 seconds, and all three men were on the ground, disarmed, disabled, but alive. Barely. Silas stood over them, not even breathing hard. Tell Carver this. You come at her again, you come at this diner again, and I won't be so nice next time. We clear. The men didn't answer, just scrambled to their car, drove off into the night. Silas stood there for a long moment, then turned, walked back into the diner. Maggie stared at him. At this man who moved like death, who fought like a demon, who protected like a guardian angel. Who are you? She whispered. Silas looked at her, and for the first time he answered honestly. I don't know, but I'm about to find out. The coffee had gone cold hours ago. Silas didn't care. He sat at the counter, staring at a photograph Maggie had placed in front of him with trembling hands. A boy, 18 years old. Dark hair, strong jaw, eyes that held fire and innocence in equal measure. Wearing a leather jacket, standing next to a motorcycle. A Harley Sportster, 1974 model. The boy was smiling. Silas touched the edge of the photograph. His hands shook because he knew that jacket. Knew it the way you know your own skin. Could feel the weight of it on his shoulders. Could smell the leather. Could remember. No, he couldn't remember. That was the problem. But something deep inside him screamed that he should. That was taken 2 weeks before he disappeared. Maggie's voice was barely a whisper. She stood beside him, close enough to touch, but not touching, giving him space. His 18th birthday. Your father bought him that bike, spent 6 months restoring it. Silas looked up at her. What happened to it? The bike. I still have it, in the garage out back. Couldn't bring myself to sell it. Just like I couldn't sell this place. Because I kept thinking one day he'd come back and he'd want it. The weight of 40 years of waiting pressed down on the room like a physical thing. Declan cleared his throat from his booth. Press, we need to talk about what happens next. Those boys Carver sent. That was a warning. Next time won't be so polite. Silas set the photograph down carefully like it might shatter. I know. So what's the play? Good question. Silas had spent 25 years in the Hells Angels, had risen through the ranks on merit, and Blood had earned the president patch because his brothers trusted him to make the hard calls to see 3 moves ahead to protect the club. But this wasn't club business. This was personal. Personal made you stupid, made you emotional, made you vulnerable. I need information, Silas said. Everything you can find on Silas Mackenzie. Birth certificate, foster records, hospital records from the fire. Everything. Declan nodded. I'll make some calls. Still got friends in low places. He paused. But press if what Mrs. Sullivan says is true, if you really are her son, then someone went to a hell of a lot of trouble to make you disappear. Someone with resources, power. The kind of power that doesn't just go away. Vincent Carver. Maybe, or maybe he's just the face. Could go higher, could go deeper. Maggie spoke up. My husband found connections before they killed him. He found names, bank accounts, real estate deals. It all led back to one family, the Carvers. Charles Carver, Silas said. The name felt like poison on his tongue. Vincent's father. Yes, he was the one David was investigating. Charles Carver ran half of Arizona's underground back then. Human trafficking, money laundering, drugs, guns, you name it. But he was smart, kept his hands clean, used proxy shell companies. By the time David got close, they killed him. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. David died instantly. The truck driver disappeared. And 2 weeks later, the psychiatric hospital burned down. Convenient timing, Declan muttered. Silas felt rage building in his chest. Cold. Controlled. The kind of rage that didn't explode. It calculated. It planned. It waited for the perfect moment to strike. Tell me about the kidnapping, he said, the one Ezra witnessed. Maggie closed her eyes, opened them. A little girl, 7 years old. Isabella Martinez. Her father was Senator Rafael Martinez, one of the most powerful men in Arizona at the time. The name hit Silas like a freight train because he knew that name. Everyone in Arizona knew that name. Senator Martinez. Retired now, but still a legend. A man who'd spent 40 years in public service. A man known for his integrity, his compassion. A man who'd lost his daughter to kidnappers when she was 7 years old. The ransom had been paid. $5 million. But Isabella Martinez had never come home. Her body had never been found. Ezra saw them take her, Maggie continued. He was at the wrong place at the wrong time. Saw 3 men force her into a van outside a shopping mall. He tried to stop them, got the license plate, went to the police. And that's when everything went to hell, Silas said. They grabbed him. Yes, put him in that hospital. Said he was having delusions. That he was dangerous. David tried to get him out, but they had judges, doctors, everyone in their pocket. And then, Silas asked, though he already knew the answer, and then the fire. Declan leaned forward. So let me get this straight. Ezra witnesses a kidnapping, gets locked up, hospital burns down, Ezra disappears, and instead of a body, we get Silas Mackenzie, 8-year-old orphan with no memory and a convenient backstory. Someone rewired his brain, Maggie said. That's the only explanation. The drugs they were using back then in psychiatric hospitals, electroshock therapy, experimental treatments, they could have erased his memories, made him forget who he was. Silas stood, abruptly walked to the window, watched the rain streak down the glass like tears. Why not just kill me? His voice was hollow. Why go through all that trouble? Silence, then Declan spoke. Because dead martyrs are dangerous, but a living ghost, a boy with no memory, no identity, that's a weapon. That's control. Control for what? Don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. The old Irishman pulled out his phone, stepped outside, started making calls. Maggie approached Silas slowly, stood beside him at the window. When you were a boy, she said quietly, you used to stand at this exact window every night before bed. You'd look out at the highway and tell me you were going to ride across the whole country someday. See everything. Go everywhere. Silas didn't respond. Couldn't. You had dreams, Ezra. Big dreams. And they took them from you. Took your name, your family, your entire life. But they couldn't take who you are. Not really. Because I see him in you, my son. The boy who stood up to bullies. Who protected the weak. Who never walked away when someone needed help. That's Silas Mackenzie, he said, not Ezra Sullivan. Is there really a difference? The question hung in the air. Before Silas could answer, Declan burst back through the door. His face was grim. "We got a problem." "What kind?" "The Hells Angels Phoenix chapter. The one you've been running for 3 years." "What about it?" "It was founded in 1985, 1 year after Ezra Sullivan disappeared." Silas felt the ground shift beneath him. So, so I got records, articles of incorporation. The original founder was listed as John Smith, obviously fake, but I dug deeper, tracked the money, the property, the connections. Declan's jaw tightened. Every single founding member had ties to Charles Carver, bank accounts, business deals, employment records. The whole chapter was built as a front. "No," Silas said, "that's not, we're legitimate. We're on half and half prez. Half the chapter is real brothers, good men. But the other half, they report to Vincent Carver. Have been for years." "And you," Declan's voice softened, "you were brought into the club in '99, right after you got back from Desert Storm. Someone recommended you, vouched for you, made sure you got patched in." "Who?" "Man named Eric Vaughn. Jim. He's dead now, killed in a bar fight in 2003. But before he died, he was on Carver's payroll." The implications crashed over Silas like a tidal wave. His entire life, his identity, his brotherhood, all of it built on lies. "They've been watching me," he said, "for 25 years, making sure I never remembered." "Looks that way. And now I'm here, in this diner, with my mother, starting to remember, which means—" The window exploded. Glass shattered inward. Silas moved on. Instinct grabbed Maggie, threw her to the ground, covered her body with his own. Gunfire erupted. Automatic weapons. Multiple shooters. The diner's walls disintegrated under the onslaught. Declan dove behind the counter, pulled his pistol, returned fire blindly. "How many?" Silas shouted. "6, maybe more." Outside, Silas could hear his brothers, the real ones. Knox, Garrett, Byrne, Hammond, returning fire. The sound of Harley engines roaring to life. But they were outgunned, outmanned. This wasn't a warning. This was an execution. Silas looked down at Maggie. Her eyes were wide, terrified. But not for herself, for him. "The back door," he said. "Go. Now. Not without you." "Mom, please." The word slipped out before he could stop it. "Mom." "Not ma'am. Not Mrs. Sullivan. Mom." Maggie's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, started crawling toward the kitchen. Silas pulled his own gun, a Colt 1911, had carried it since Desert Storm. Never thought he'd have to use it on American soil. He was wrong. He rose up, fired 3 shots through the shattered window. Heard a scream, one shooter down. But there were more. So many more. "Declan, get her out of here." "What about you?" "I'll hold them off." "Like hell you will." The old Irishman grabbed Maggie, pulled her toward the kitchen, but as they reached the door, it exploded inward. 2 men, tactical gear, night vision, professional killers. Declan fired first, dropped one, but the second got a shot off. The bullet caught Declan in the chest. He went down hard. "No," Silas roared. He fired again and again, emptied his magazine into the second shooter. The man collapsed, but the damage was done. Silas rushed to Declan, pressed his hands against the wound. Blood poured between his fingers. Too much blood. "Press," Declan coughed. Blood on his lips. "Stay with me. You hear me? Stay with me." Another cough. "The club. Half are traitors, but the other half—" He struggled to breathe. "They're your real brothers. Trust them. Knox, Garrett, Byrne, Hammond. They're clean. Don't talk. Save your strength." "No time." Declan grabbed Silas's jacket, pulled him close. "You're Ezra Sullivan, son of David Sullivan, son of Margaret Sullivan. Don't let them take that from you again. You hear me? Don't let them win." Declan saw, pressitoin, a weak smile. "It's been an honor riding with you." His hand went slack. Silas felt something inside him break, not shatter, worse. It went cold, frozen. The part of him that felt mercy, that felt compassion. It died with Declan O'Sullivan. What remained was something else entirely. Something forged in the deserts of Iraq. In the fire of a psychiatric hospital 40 years ago. In the lies that had shaped his entire existence. What remained was a weapon. Maggie appeared at his side, tears streaming down her face. Silas, we have to go. Please. He stood slowly, looked down at Declan's body, at the man who'd been more than a brother, who'd been a friend, a mentor, family. Get to the garage, Silas said. His voice had changed. Colder. Harder. There's a motorcycle there. Ezra's Sportster. Take it. Head north. Don't stop until you reach Flagstaff. Find a motel. Pay cash. Wait for me. What are you going to do? He looked at her, and Maggie saw it then. The boy she'd raised, the man he'd become, and something new, something terrifying. Vengeance. I'm going to end this. Outside, the gunfire had stopped. Silas heard voices, his brothers, the real ones, calling for him. He stepped over Declan's body, walked to the door, kicked it open. 4 of his brothers stood there. Knox, Garrett, Byrne, Hammond. All wounded, all bloody, but alive. Behind them, 6 bodies. The shooters, all dead. But off to the side, Silas saw something that made his blood freeze. 3 more bodies. His brothers. The other half of the chapter. The ones on Carver's payroll. Shot in the back. Knox stepped forward, blood running from a gash on his forehead. They turned on us, President. Started shooting. Tried to take us from behind. His voice broke. We had to. Silas understood. The civil war he'd feared had just happened, and it was over in seconds. Declan? Garrett asked. Silas shook his head. Knox swore, punched the wall. Those bastards. Those goddamn bastards. It's not over, Silas said. Carver sent them, which means he knows who I am, what I might remember. Byrne, the youngest of them at 42, spoke up. Then we hit him back. Hard. We know where his office is, where he lives. We burn it all down. No, Silas's voice cut through the rage. Not yet. We do this smart. We find out what he's hiding, why he needs me dead, and then we destroy him completely. Hammond nodded. What do you need? Press of time and information. Can you boys hold down the fort? Keep anyone else from coming after Mrs. Sullivan? With our lives, Knox said. Silas looked at each of them. These men who'd just killed their own brothers to protect him, who'd chosen loyalty over everything else. This isn't your fight, he said. Knox stepped forward, grabbed Silas's shoulder. Brother, the second they came after you, it became our fight. We ride together. We die together. That's the code. The code is broken. The chapter is compromised. Then we build a new one, a clean one. But we do it after we put Carver in the ground. Silas wanted to argue, wanted to tell them to walk away, to save themselves, but he knew better. These were hell's angels, real ones, the kind who didn't run, didn't hide, didn't abandon their brothers. All right, Silas said, here's what we do. They gathered close and in the ruins of the Sunset Diner, surrounded by bodies and blood and broken glass, Silas Mackenzie, Ezra Sullivan began to plan. Not an attack, a reckoning. Maggie watched from the kitchen doorway. Watched her son, because that's what he was now, whether he fully accepted it or not, transform into something she'd never seen before. A leader, a warrior, a man who would burn the world down to protect the people he loved. She slipped away quietly, found the garage, found the Sportster exactly where she'd left it 40 years ago, covered in dust but maintained. Oil changed every year, tires rotated, battery replaced, because she'd always known, someday, somehow, her son would come home. She kick-started the engine. It roared to life. Perfect. Beautiful. She rode into the night, heading north, trusting that Silas would follow, trusting that after 40 years of waiting, she wouldn't lose him again. Back at the diner, Silas made a phone call, a number he'd memorized years ago but never used. FBI, Phoenix Field Office. I need to speak to whoever's handling the Carver Mining Corporation investigation. A pause. Sir, there should be, because I have evidence of murder, conspiracy, human trafficking, and corruption going back 40 years. Another pause. Longer this time. Who is this? My name is Ezra Sullivan, son of Officer David Sullivan, and I'm about to blow your case wide open. The voice on the other end changed, became sharp, focused. Stay where you are. Agent Garrett Walsh is en route. Tell him to hurry, because people are dying and I'm not planning to wait much longer. Silas hung up, looked at his brothers. FBI's coming. You boys should clear out. I'll handle this. Knox shook his head. What's happening, President? We stay. They'll arrest you. All of you. Weapons charges, murder, self-defense or not, you'll be tied up in court for months. Then we get good lawyers. Silas smiled despite everything. Despite the death, the blood, the horror. These were his brothers. Not by blood, but by choice. And that counted for something. 20 minutes later, federal vehicles rolled up. 8 of them. Agents in tactical gear poured out. Leading them was a man in his 50s, tall, gray hair, hard eyes that had seen too much and believed too little. Agent Garrett Walsh. He surveyed the carnage, the bodies, the blood, the shattered diner. Then he looked at Silas. You Ezra Sullivan. Used to be, now I'm Silas Mackenzie. Take your pick. How about you start by telling me what the hell happened here? Silas did. All of it. The photograph, the memories, Declan's investigation, the attack, everything. Walsh listened, didn't interrupt, didn't take notes, just listened. When Silas finished, Walsh was quiet for a long moment. I've been investigating Vincent Carver for 4 years. Money laundering, tax evasion, bribery. Can't make anything stick. He's too smart, too connected. But human trafficking, Ron, if what you're saying is true, it's true. Then I need proof, real proof, not just your word. I'll get you proof. How? Silas smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made grown men take a step back. By making Carver think he's won, by walking right into his trap, and then burning it down around him. Walsh studied him. That's suicide. Maybe, but it's the only way to get what you need. Carver is not stupid. He won't incriminate himself unless he thinks he's safe, and unless he thinks I'm neutralized. And how do you plan to make him think that? You arrest me, right here, right now, charge me with murder, make it public, make sure Carver sees it. He'll think he's in the clear. That's when he'll get sloppy. And then what? Then you wire me up, let me out, and I go have a conversation with Vincent Carver. Get him to confess everything on tape. Walsh frowned. That's the dumbest plan I've ever heard. You got a better one? Walsh didn't answer because he didn't. I'm running out of time, Agent Walsh. My mother is out there somewhere, alone, scared, and Carver knows she's the only person who can verify who I am. He'll go after her. It's just a matter of when. We can protect her. You couldn't protect Isabella Martinez. You couldn't protect my father. You've been investigating Carver for 4 years and gotten nowhere. So forgive me if I don't trust the federal government to keep my mother alive. Walsh's jaw tightened, but he nodded, because Silas was right. Okay, we do it your way, but you're wearing a wire, and you're not going in alone. We'll have agents positioned nearby. Anything goes wrong, we move in. Fine. And Sullivan, Mackenzie, whoever the hell you are. Yeah, don't do anything stupid. Silas thought about Declan, about his father, about 40 years of lies and stolen memories. Too late for that. Walsh arrested him, made a show of it. Handcuffs, perp walk, cameras flashing. The headline would read, Hell's Angels president arrested in diner massacre. Carver would see it, would believe it, would relax. And that's when Silas would strike. They took him to the federal building, put him in an interview room, left him alone for 2 hours. When Walsh came back, he had a wire. State-of-the-art, invisible, undetectable. You know how to use this. I was EOD in Desert Storm. I can handle a wire. Walsh helped him put it on, checked it, double-checked it. You're clear. We'll be listening. We'll be close. But Sullivan, if he admits to killing Isabella Martinez, if he tells you where the body is buried, you get out immediately. You understand, don't try to be a hero. I'm not a hero, Agent Walsh. I'm just a man looking for answers. Answers can get you killed. So can lies. And I've been living with those for 40 years. They released him at midnight. No charges filed. Officially, he was a witness. Unofficially, he was bait. Knox and the brothers were waiting outside. What's the play? Press. I'm going to see Carver. Alone. Like hell you are. I have to. It's the only way. Knox grabbed his arm. Brother, you walk in there alone, you're not walking back out. Maybe, but it's a risk I have to take. Why? Silas looked at him. At this man who'd killed his own brothers to protect him, who'd stood by him through everything. Because she's my mother, and I've already lost her once. I'm not losing her again. Knox held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded, released his arm. Then we follow. Far enough back that Carver won't see us. Close enough to help when you need it. FBI said, I don't give a damn what the FBI said. You're our brother. We protect our own. Silas felt something warm spread through his chest. Gratitude, loyalty, family. All right, but if this goes south, you get out. You take Mrs. Sullivan. You run, you don't look back. We'll burn that bridge when we get to it. They rode through the night, 5 Harleys, engines roaring, heading toward the one place Silas swore he'd never go. The Carver estate, 20 acres on the outskirts of Phoenix, mansion. Guards, walls, everything a man with something to hide would need. Silas rode up to the gate alone. The others hung back, watching, waiting. He pressed the intercom button. Yes, a voice, suspicious. Tell Mr. Carver that Ezra Sullivan is here to see him. A long pause. Then the gates opened. Silas rode through. The mansion loomed ahead, lights blazing in every window. He parked the Harley, dismounted, walked to the front door. It opened before he could knock. Vincent Carver stood there, smiling, like welcoming an old friend. Ezra, or should I say Silas, I wasn't sure you'd come. We need to talk. Indeed we do. Please, come in. Silas stepped inside. The door closed behind him. And in that moment he knew this was a trap. But it was too late to turn back. The war had begun, and only one of them was walking out alive. Agent Walsh sat in the surveillance van 3 blocks away, listening, watching, waiting. The wire crackled to life. Carver's voice. Can I offer you a drink? Silas's voice. No thanks. This isn't a social call. No, I suppose it isn't. You've caused me a great deal of trouble, Ezra. Killed my men. Survived my trap. Very impressive. I want answers. About my father. About Isabella Martinez. About what you did to me. A pause, then Carver laughed. Cold. Cruel. What I did to you, oh Ezra. You have it all wrong. I didn't do anything to you. Then who did? My father, Charles Carver. God rest his soul. He's the one who saw potential in you. Saw a boy who could be molded, shaped, turned into something useful. Useful how? That's the beautiful part. You still don't remember, do you? Silas's voice went cold. Remember what you did, what we made you do, before we erased your mind. Silence. Walsh leaned forward. This was it. The confession they needed. You killed Isabella Martinez Ezra, not my father, not his men. You. The words hung in the air like poison. You're lying. We have video. Would you like to see it? A rustling sound, a laptop opening, then Silas's voice, barely a whisper. Oh God. You were drugged, of course. Experimental compounds, made you suggestible, compliant. My father told you to kill her. And you did. Strangled her with your own hands. You were 18 years old, and you murdered a 7-year-old girl. Walsh's blood ran cold, because if it was true, if Silas really had killed Isabella Martinez, then everything changed. On the wire, Silas's breathing had become ragged, panicked. No, I wouldn't. I couldn't. But you did, and we have proof, which means, Ezra, you belong to us. You always have, and you always will. Where is she? Where's the body? Carver laughed again. Oh, that's the best part. She's buried right under your mother's precious diner. Has been for 40 years. Every cup of coffee she served, every pie she baked, all of it on top of a dead child's grave. Poetic, don't you think? Walsh grabbed his radio. Move in. Now, all units. But even as he gave the order, he knew they were too late. Inside the mansion, Silas stared at the laptop screen, at the grainy video, at the boy himself with dead eyes and shaking hands, at the small body going limp. And something inside him shattered. Not his resolve, his humanity. You're wrong about one thing, Silas said quietly. What's that? I don't belong to you. I never did. He grabbed the laptop, smashed it against Carver's head. The billionaire went down hard. Alarms blared. Guards rushed in. But Silas was already moving, already fighting, already killing. Because he wasn't Ezra Sullivan anymore. Wasn't Silas Mackenzie. He was something worse. He was a weapon with nothing left to lose. And God help anyone who stood in his way. The mansion erupted into chaos. Guards poured through doorways like ants from a kicked hill. 6 of them. 8. Too many to count. All armed, all trained, all expendable. Silas moved through them like smoke, like death wearing leather and fury. Every lesson from Desert Storm, every instinct honed over 58 years of survival, all of it converging in this single moment. He wasn't fighting to win, he was fighting to destroy. The first guard went down with a crushed windpipe. The second took Silas's elbow to the temple, dropped like a stone. The third managed to get his gun up, managed to pull the trigger. The bullet grazed Silas's shoulder. He didn't feel it, didn't care. He was beyond pain now. He grabbed the guard's weapon, turned it, fired 3 shots, 3 guards down. But more kept coming. Vincent Carver scrambled backward, blood running from his scalp where the laptop had split skin. His eyes were wide, not with fear, with rage. Kill him! Kill him now! Outside, Knox heard the gunfire, saw the guards mobilizing. We're going in, he said. Garrett grabbed his arm. Wait for the FBI. Walsh isn't here. Our brother is, and he's dying in there. The 4 of them roared toward the mansion, Harley screaming. They crashed through the front gate, through the perfectly manicured lawn, right up to the front steps. They dismounted, weapons drawn, kicked in the doors. What they found was carnage. 8 guards down, some unconscious, some not. And Silas standing in the center of the room, bleeding, breathing hard, gun in hand, pointed directly at Vincent Carver's head. Press, Knox shouted. Stand down. FBI is coming. Silas didn't move, didn't acknowledge them. His entire focus was on Carver. Tell me the truth, Silas said. His voice was hollow, empty. Did I kill her? Did I kill Isabella Martinez? Carver smiled through bloody teeth. You saw the video. Videos can be faked. Not that one. That one was real. You murdered a child, Ezra. And deep down you know it's true. You can feel it, can't you? The guilt, the shame. It's why you have nightmares, why you can't remember. Your mind is protecting you from what you did. Silas's hand trembled, just slightly, but Knox saw it. Brother, pray, Knox said quietly. Don't do this. Put the gun down. Let the law handle it. The law, Silas laughed. It was the sound of something breaking. The law didn't protect my father, didn't protect Isabella, didn't protect me. The law is what let monsters like Carver run free for 40 years. Then let us be better than them. Let us prove the law can work. It's too late for that. Silas's finger tightened on the trigger. And that's when the front door exploded inward. FBI tactical teams, 20 agents in full gear, weapons raised, red laser sights painting every surface. Agent Walsh strode in behind them. His face was grim. Sullivan, drop the weapon. Now. Silas didn't move. I said drop it. He killed her, Silas said. Isabella Martinez, he and his father. They took a 7-year-old girl and they murdered her. And then they made me think I did it. Made me carry that guilt for 40 years. We have the recording. We have his confession. We'll bring him to justice. But not like this. Not with you throwing your life away. My life was already thrown away 40 years ago when they erased who I was. Walsh stepped closer, slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. Listen to me. We checked the video Carver showed you. Our tech team analyzed it while you were inside. It's a fake, deep fake technology. Very sophisticated, but fake nonetheless. Silas's hand wavered. What? You didn't kill Isabella Martinez, Silas. You were drugged. You were there, but you didn't kill her. The coroner's report from 1984, the one that was buried, sealed. We found it. Isabella died from a drug overdose, sodium pentothal, given to her during the kidnapping. She was dead before you ever touched her. The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. But the video, I saw myself. You saw what Carver wanted you to see. What his father created to control you. To break you, but it's not real. You're innocent, Silas. You always were. The gun dropped from Silas's hand, clattered to the floor. His knees followed. He collapsed. Not from injury, from relief, from the weight of 40 years of guilt that wasn't his lifting all at once. Knox rushed forward, caught him before he hit the ground. I got you, brother. I got you. Silas looked up, tears streaming down his face. I didn't kill her. No, you didn't. I didn't kill her. That's right. You're a good man, Press. Always have been. Federal agents moved in, grabbed Vincent Carver, cuffed him. Read him his rights. Carver smiled even as they hauled him to his feet. You think this is over? He looked at Silas. You think you won? My father built an empire on that girl's death. Made billions. You really think one arrest is going to bring it all down? Walsh stepped forward. Your father's dead. His empire is gone. And you're going to spend the rest of your life in a cell, wondering if it was all worth it. It was, because I broke him. Carver nodded toward Silas. Look at him, destroyed, even knowing he's innocent. The doubt will eat him alive. Every night, every dream, he'll wonder. And that wondering will kill him slower than any bullet. Walsh hit him, one clean punch to the jaw. Carver went down. Oops, Walsh said, slipped. They dragged Carver away. And as the mansion emptied, only Silas and his brothers remained. Burns spoke first. What now, Press? Good question. What now? Silas had spent 40 years not knowing who he was. And now that he knew now that the truth was out, what was he supposed to do with it? Now, he said slowly, now I find my mother. Maggie had made it to Flagstaff, checked into a motel under a fake name, paid cash, locked herself in room 17, and waited. Hours passed. No word, no call, nothing. She paced, prayed, tried not to think about what might have happened, about losing her son again, this time permanently. The knock on the door came at 3 in the morning. Maggie froze, reached for the shotgun she had brought from the diner, approached the door. Who is it? It's me, Mom. She threw the door open. Silas stood there, covered in blood, exhausted but alive. Maggie pulled him inside, shut the door, locked it. Are you hurt? Let me see. I'm fine. Most of this isn't mine. What happened? Silas told her. Everything. The confrontation, the video, the truth. When he finished, Maggie was crying. Not from sadness, from relief. I knew, she whispered. I knew you couldn't have done it. You were a good boy, a good man. They tried to make you think otherwise. But I knew. How could you know? Because I'm your mother, and a mother always knows. Silas pulled her into his arms, held her. For the first time in 40 years, Ezra Sullivan hugged his mother, and for the first time in 40 years, Margaret Sullivan held her son. They stayed like that for a long time, neither wanting to let go, neither willing to risk losing this moment. Finally, Maggie pulled back, looked up at him. What happens now? Now we go home. Home, the diner, we rebuild it, together. But Carver said, Isabella's body, it's buried there under the foundation. Then we'll find her, give her back to her family, give them closure, and then we start over. Clean slate, no more lies, no more secrets. Maggie nodded. And are you Silas or Ezra? He thought about it, really thought about it. I'm both. Ezra is who I was. Silas is who I became. I don't want to lose either one. Then don't. Keep both names, both lives. Be the man you were meant to be. I don't know who that is. Then we'll figure it out. Together. Outside, the sun was beginning to rise, painting the desert sky in shades of gold and crimson. A new day, a new beginning. But first there was work to do. 6 months later, the Sunset Diner rose from its ashes. Bigger, better, rebuilt by Hell's Angels and community volunteers and people who believed in second chances. The foundation had been excavated. Isabella Martinez's remains had been found, exactly where Carver said they would be. DNA confirmed her identity. Senator Rafael Martinez, now 76 years old, had come to claim his daughter, had stood in the ruins of the diner and wept for the child he'd lost, for the 40 years of not knowing. Silas had stood beside him. Two fathers, two losses, two men who understood that some wounds never fully heal. "Thank you," Martinez had said, "for bringing her home. I'm sorry it took so long. You were a victim too, my daughter, your father, you, all victims of the same monsters. But now they're gone, and we can finally rest." The funeral had been small, private, just family and a few close friends. Silas and Maggie had attended, had laid flowers on the grave, had promised to never forget. Now standing in the newly rebuilt diner, Silas looked around at what they'd created. The counter where Maggie had served coffee for 42 years. Restored. The booths where travelers had rested. Rebuilt. The kitchen where apple pies had been baked. Modernized but maintaining the old charm. And above the door, a new sign, Sullivan's Homecoming Diner, where lost souls find family. The grand opening was today. People from all over had come, some out of curiosity, some out of support, some because they'd heard the story and wanted to be part of something bigger than themselves. Knox stood behind the counter pouring coffee. He'd taken a job as manager. Said the road life was getting old. Said he wanted roots. Garrett and Byrne worked the kitchen. Hammond greeted customers at the door. The Hells Angels Phoenix chapter had been officially disbanded. Too much corruption, too many lies. But in its place, something new had been born. Sullivan's Phoenix, a new chapter. Clean, legitimate, dedicated to helping veterans, finding missing persons, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Maggie moved through the diner with a grace that defied her 79 years, smiling, laughing, hugging people she hadn't seen in decades. She was home, finally, and so was her son. Silas stood at the window, the same window Ezra had stood at 40 years ago, looking out at Highway 89, watching the cars pass. He felt a hand on his shoulder, turned. Agent Walsh stood there, out of uniform, civilian clothes. "Didn't expect to see you here," Silas said. "Wouldn't miss it. Besides, I have news." "What kind?" "The kind you'll want to hear. We excavated the rest of the Carver properties, found evidence of 12 more victims, going back 50 years. Charles Carver wasn't just a criminal. He was a serial killer. Used his mining operations to dispose of bodies." "Jesus." "Yeah, but because you came forward, we were able to close 12 cold cases. Give 12 families closure. That means something." Silas nodded. "What about Carver Vincent?" "Trial starts next month. He's facing 3 consecutive life sentences. Won't see daylight again." "Good." Walsh paused. "There's something else. We found records about the psychiatric hospital, about the experimental drug program they were running. Turns out it wasn't just you. There were others, kids who disappeared, who were given new identities, turned into assets for various criminal organizations." Silas felt his blood run cold. "How many?" "We don't know yet, but we're looking, and we're going to find them. Bring them home, just like you came home." "I want to help." "I was hoping you'd say that. We could use someone with your unique perspective." "I'm not a Fed." "No, but you're a survivor, and sometimes that's worth more than any badge." They shook hands. An understanding passed between them. This wasn't over. The fight wasn't finished. But for today, for this moment, it was enough to celebrate the small victories. Walsh left and Silas returned to the window. A car pulled up. Old, beat up, barely running. A young man got out, maybe 25. Thin, nervous. He looked at the diner like it might disappear if he blinked. He walked to the door, hesitated, then pushed it open. Silas watched him, saw the way he moved, careful, uncertain, like a man who'd been hurt and didn't trust the world not to hurt him again. The young man approached the counter. Maggie smiled at him. "Welcome to Sullivan's. What can I get you, hun?" I'm not sure. I saw the sign. About lost souls finding family. Is that real? Or just a saying?" Maggie's smile softened. "It's real. Come on, sit down. Let me get you some coffee and pie. You look like you could use some pie." "I don't have much money." Didn't ask for money, asked if you wanted Pete. The young man's eyes filled with tears. He nodded, sat down. Maggie brought him apple pie, extra cinnamon, and coffee, black. Silas walked over, sat down beside the young man. I'm Silas. What's your name? David Martinez Jr. Silas went still. Martinez. Yeah, my grandfather was Senator Rafael Martinez. My aunt, she was Isabella, the girl who was killed 40 years ago. I know, I helped find her, helped bring her home. David looked at him, really looked. You're him, Ezra Sullivan, the one in the news, the one who brought down the Carvers. That's me. I came here because I wanted to thank you. My grandfather, before he died last month, he told me to find you. Said you gave him peace. Let him finally rest. I wanted to tell you that meant everything to our family. Silas felt his throat tighten. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you, David paused. But that's not the only reason I came. I want to learn what you do, finding people, helping them. I want to be part of that. Why? Because my whole life I grew up under the shadow of my aunt's death. My family was broken, destroyed by not knowing. And you gave us answers, gave us closure. I want to do that for other families. I want to help. Silas looked at Maggie. She nodded, smiled. He looked at Knox, at Garrett, at Byrne and Hammond, his brothers, his family. They nodded too. All right, Silas said, but it's not easy work. It's dangerous, painful. You'll see things that'll haunt you, meet people who will break your heart. In some cases you'll never solve, never get closure. I know, but I still want to try. Then welcome to the family, David. They shook hands, and in that moment Silas understood something fundamental. This was his purpose, not writing, not fighting, not running from a past he couldn't remember, but helping others find what he'd found. Home, family, truth. The diner filled up. People came and went. Stories were told. Laughter echoed off the walls. And as the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold, Silas stood outside with his mother. You did good, son, Maggie said. Your father would be proud. I wish I could remember him. You do, in the ways that matter, in the man you became, in the choices you make. He's there, in your heart. Silas put his arm around her shoulders. I spent 40 years not knowing who I was, where I came from, what I was supposed to do with my life, and now I know I'm your son, I'm a brother, I'm a survivor, and I'm home. Yes, you are. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the highway, watching the travelers pass. Some stopped, some kept going, but all of them had a choice, to stay lost or to find their way home. Inside the diner, Knox called out, Hey, press, we got a situation. Silas turned. What kind of situation? The good kind. We just got 3 calls, 3 separate missing persons cases, families looking for help. Looks like word's getting around about what we do. Silas looked at Maggie. She smiled. Go on, they need you. You sure? I've had you to myself for 6 months. Time to share you with the world. But you come back for Sunday dinner. You hear me? Yes, ma'am. He kissed her forehead, walked back inside, sat down with David and his brothers. All right, let's hear it. Who needs help? Knox laid out 3 files, 3 faces, 3 stories of people who'd vanished, who'd been forgotten by everyone except the families who loved them. Which one do we take first? Garrett asked. Silas looked at each file, studied each face, felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Not a burden, a purpose. All 3, he said. We take all 3. We don't stop until we bring them home, every single one. That's a lot of work, Prez. Then we better get started. They bent over the files, planning, strategizing, doing what they did best, finding the lost, bringing them home. And outside, the sign above the diner glowed in the darkness. Sullivan's Homecoming Diner, where lost souls find family. It wasn't just a saying, it was a promise, one that Silas Ezra Sullivan intended to keep for the rest of his life. 2 years later, on a Sunday morning, Silas stood in the garage behind the diner, working on the Sportster, the bike that had belonged to Ezra Sullivan 42 years ago. He'd restored it completely. New engine, new paint, but keeping the original frame, the original soul. Because some things were worth preserving, worth honoring. Behind him, footsteps. He turned. Maggie stood there, now 81, moving slower, but still strong, still fierce. "Breakfast is ready," she said. "I'll be right there." She walked over, ran her hand over the bike's seat. He loved this bike. Used to spend hours out here, tinkering, dreaming. "I know, I remember." And he did. The memories had come back slowly. Over months. Over years. Not all of them. Maybe not even most of them. But enough. Enough to know who Ezra Sullivan had been, who he dreamed of becoming. "You ever regret it?" Maggie asked. "Coming back. Learning the truth. Sometimes ignorance really is bliss." Silas thought about it. About 40 years of not knowing, of living a lie, of being someone else's weapon. "No," he said. "I don't regret it, because even if the truth hurt, even if it was hard, it was mine. And that's worth everything." Maggie nodded, squeezed his hand. "Come on." "David's waiting, and Knox made his famous pancakes. They're terrible." "I know, but don't tell him that." Silas laughed, followed her inside. The diner was full, not with customers, with family. Knox and his wife Sarah, a former Marine, Garrett and his 3 kids, Vernon Hammond, David Martinez Jr., who'd become like a son to both Silas and Maggie, and others, people they'd helped over the years, people who'd found their way home and decided to stay. They gathered around the table, said grace, ate terrible pancakes and perfect apple pie. And for the first time in 40 years, Ezra Sullivan, Silas Mackenzie, whatever name he chose to use, felt complete. Not because he'd found all the answers, but because he'd found what mattered most. Home, family, purpose. After breakfast, Silas walked outside, stood at that window, the one he'd stood at as a boy, the one he'd stood at as a stranger, the one he now stood at as a man who finally knew himself. Highway 89 stretched out before him, endless, infinite, full of possibility. Somewhere out there, someone was lost. Someone was searching. Someone needed help. And Silas would find them, because that's what he did now. That's who he was. Not Reaper, not the president of a motorcycle club, not a weapon, not a victim. He was a son who'd come home, a brother who protected his own, a man who'd survived hell and chosen mercy over vengeance. He was Ezra Silas Sullivan, and he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Behind him, Maggie's voice, soft, warm. "You coming back in? David wants to show you something." Silas turned, smiled. "Yeah, Mom, I'm coming." He took one last look at the highway, at the endless road, at all the lost souls out there waiting to be found. Then he walked back inside, to the family that had waited 40 years for him, to the home he'd finally found, to the life he'd always been meant to live. The door closed behind him, and the sign above glowed bright against the desert night. Sullivan's Homecoming Diner, where lost souls find family, where broken things are mended, where the lost find on their way home, always.